Hi BookTube, and welcome to what is hopefully a fairly shortish new video. Today is February the 15th, a fairly ordinary working day for me, and at the end of the work day I went on to Amazon to buy some books, and I went onto my wish list to see if any had dropped significantly in price, because I tend to put books that are probably a bit too expensive to indulge in. They've just come out in hardback, and I saw that one by Gina I can't remember her name, Gina Apostolou, called Bibliolepsy, had come down by about £6, which is not insignificant. So I put that in my basket. But you need basically an order of £20 in order to have free postage. So I was casting around for something just to top up the order. There was nothing else on my wish list that fit that, so then I started typing in books by some of my favourite authors who it might be about time for a new book to come out, and I typed in the name of one of my favourite authors, saw the list of books of his that I've got and read, and then sort of towards the bottom there's one I didn't recognise, and I clicked on it, and it's published today without any fanfare, clearly. It has literally come out today, and I went, it's not on Goodreads, so I just put it in my Google search engine to see if there are any reviews of it or anything, because I couldn't even tell if it was fiction or non-fiction, because he does write both, this author. And this is what I got. Very unusual. Apart from, well, in fact, even when you put in sort of typos with X's and J's instead of proper letters, you still normally get something. But there was not a single reference to this book that's come out today, which is absolutely par for the course of this writer, which is why I say he's the greatest living author that no one's ever heard of or read. Certainly not read. They might have heard of him, more of which are non. Anyway, so I couldn't believe that there were no references to it. So I scrolled down to the end of the first page of links, and I saw this. There's a reference to one of my own flash fiction stories on my blog from 2016. So we are linked digitally, although he's not actually on the page because there's no references to his book at all. Anyway, so that was a pleasant surprise. Okay, so what is this book, and why am I so taken with it? It's called Motor Spirit: The Long Hunt for the Zodiac, as in the Zodiac Killer, by an author called Jared Kobeck. Now, I've seen films and documentaries about the Zodiac Killer, who was a serial killer who was never caught, who taunted the police by sending strange ciphered messages to the San Francisco Chronicle. And at the time, one Armistead Mopan was a journalist there, while he was writing in his spare time Tales from the City. Obviously when that started to take off, then he left the San Francisco Chronicle to become a full-time author, and indeed he approached one of the detectives on the Zodiac Killer case to talk to him, to put him in the Tales from the City series. And then there was a whole thing about Mopan accused this real-life detective of faking fan mail to Mopan about this character of the detective in Mopan's book. That somehow it was linked to the Zodiac Killer himself. It's all a bit mad. Anyway, so I know an awful lot about the Zodiac Killing. So I wasn't. My immediate reaction was not to be terribly enthused about reading a book on something that I know a lot about. As I say, I don't even know if it's fiction or non-fiction. There's no blurb reproduced, or at least I thought there was no blurb reproduced even on Amazon, until I realised in the where you can take a look. Well, it's not take a look inside, but you can zero in on the image for greater detail. There is a handwritten letter in the style of the Zodiac, although without the ciphers, and it's either been penned by Kobeck or the author himself, or by his marketing team of his publishers. I don't even know who's published this book, but anyway. And it says, amongst it, I mean, you could say that's in bad taste, which it probably is, but anyway. Have you ever wanted, it's hard to read because this is in sort of handwriting. Have you ever wanted to read a book that is so bleak that it exists post-hope, in the blank space where your soul is stained and gnawed. California will never seem the same after you've read this book. So I'm hoping, rather than it being a sort of a strict sort of case study of the case of the Zodiac Killer, or trying to work out who he was, it's more about California, because of course California is the place of Silicon Valley, Tech Central, the Beach Boys, and sort of Endless Sun. But it's also the place of the Manson killings, the Zodiac, and more recently, finally, the Golden State Killer was finally apprehended. So that's my hope for interest in the book, that it's actually a portrait of California. But we'll see when it gets here. The other thing is, I trust in Jared Kobeck's abilities to make anything, fiction or non-fiction, a wonderful read. So I'm briefly going to just flick through why I think this guy deserves more recognition. I've got longer reviews of most of the books I'm going to talk about, and I'll put the links to those down below. So the only way you're likely to have heard of Jared Kobeck is his breakout book called I Hate the Internet, came out in 2016. And, you can forget all these non-fiction books about echo chambers and diminishing attention spans because we're spending so much time online and on our phones. You can forget books like No One Is Talking About This, which is prize listed. Because this guy, I'm not saying he was the first, 2016, but he got there before most of these people. He is whip crack smart in his analysis and his understanding and his satire. I mean, this is one of the funniest books I've ever read. Technically, it's not a novel. I mean, technically it is a novel, but it isn't really. It's Kobeck unleashing his satire. There are two characters at the centre of it, more of which anon, but it's the book's not really about them. And I think one of the reasons that Kobeck isn't particularly well known is because he's not deemed a literary writer, because he doesn't write proper novels, although he has. But this isn't a proper novel by all the measures and markers of what a novel is, but it's a supreme 5-star plus read, because it's funny, it's trenchant, and it's perspicacious. And if you imbibe it deep into your soul, you'll quit all social media immediately. Unfortunately, I don't have a BookTube review of this. I read it before I went on. I joined BookTube, but I highly recommend you read this book, even if you read nothing else by Jared Kobeck. So, not in the order in which they came out, but the two characters from I Hate the Internet sort of called out to Kobeck for their own novel. And this is called The Future Won't Be Long. And it's all about the New York club dance scene of the 80s. And I hated it. Again, it's more of a novel than this is, but I didn't find the characters were interesting enough to justify a novel. And also, I'm not interested in the club scene anywhere. I have a deep suspicion of mass Dionysiac celebrations. I don't mind it on kind of small local levels, but not when it's commercialized, it's driven by fashion, it's driven by drugs, and you have such a mass desire of getting out of one's senses and head in a sort of commercially produced way that the music speaks to. There is an interesting relationship between the different genres of music and the different drugs that the makers of those music genres made, but this isn't it. And so I don't want to spend too long on this, although I will post my link to the review if you're interested. Why I say he can write a novel is because he wrote this book called Atta, published by Semiotext, which is the imprint run by Chris Kraus, the author of I Love Dick. And this is about the leader of the 9/11 bombers. And it's an amazing, amazing novel. I mean, it's a brilliant insight into the workings of a guy who obviously we don't know about because he blew himself up. It's written in alternate first and third person, showing the sort of the struggle within Atta, at least in this book, between his sort of militant Islamic fundamentalism and also the seductions and repulsions of his life in the West that a lot of a lot of the ideas in militant Islam are how decadent the West is and how venal and corrupt it is. So even if, it's a brilliant character study, the fact that it's the guy who was the ringleader of 9/11 puts it out there even more. But even if he wasn't, even if it was just a study of a character who didn't go on to blow up the planes, just the study of a troubled character, this is a superb book. And it's a novel, and it's literary. It's literary because the construction of character is so deep and profound and analytical. So he can write novels when he wants to. And on to Only Americans Burn in Hell, which is his last proper novel release, which sort of is an extension of I Hate the Internet. Very funny, again not really a novel. There, it has a thin veneer of being a fantasy novel, but it's poking fun at that. It pokes fun at Harry Potter. It pokes fun at noir crime, modern noir crime from Scandinavia, as well as the internet, as well as the role of Saudi Arabia in American culture and affairs by buying up everything. This was published before China took over that role. Anyway, very funny, worth a read. Not a perfect book, and certainly not a novel. Again, which is why I think nobody reads him, because he's not treated seriously. He is a satirist. He is funny, but he's also, as with most satire, there is a serious point underlying his work. And he really struggled to get this published. No one in America would touch it. Eventually it was published by Serpent's Tail in the UK and Europe. I assume it is out in America now in some sort of distribution deal via Serpent's Tail. And on to, he's very ensconced in the culture. He's written books set in California, including this new one. But The Future Won't Be Long was about New York. This one, Do Everything Wrong, XXX Temptation Against the World, is very much a book about Florida. I'll talk about that in a minute. This, if you won't read Why Should I Write, is one of my favourite books ever. Just as, before selfie sticks, it was celebrities really first who were sort of putting themselves online and out in the public in that way, through things like sex tapes and things like that. And what Kobek has done is he's got hold of these things that have got sort of released into the public domain that celebrities probably wish hadn't, and he's transcribed sort of extracts from them, and that's what we get here. So there is the infamous sex tape between Motley Crue, whatever his name was, and Pamela Anderson Lee, Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson Lee. There's also extracts from fairly disgraceful behaviour by Tom Sizemore, Paris Hilton, Colin Farrell, Kim Kardashian, the usual, Miley Cyrus, the usual suspects. And at the end of each extract, he gives their rap sheet, what they're literally, at the time when this was published, what they'd actually been criminally charged for. And it's just a work of genius. And of course, this has now become all our lives, where we put, our own mundane lives online for people to view. I'm not going to go any further than that, but the fact that people send pictures of their genitalia down the phone to other people is very much what celebrities were sort of doing ahead of the curve. And onto this, XXX Temptation was a rapper who was sort of just beginning to have national success in the US, but was very much straitened by his upbringing and his criminality, which he always managed to dodge out of being imprisoned for, mainly for domestic abuse. I don't know if the authorities were swayed by his burgeoning fame, his sort of local celebrity or what, but he was never pulled up for it, and in the end ended up dying. Non-fiction, brilliant treatment, again brilliant sort of insight about the sort of cultural tendencies of race, stardom, escaping your upbringing, succumbing to your upbringing, all that sort of stuff. So I would definitely start with I Hate the Internet. I mean, there's no two ways about it. This is the first book of his. I read, no, that's not true. I read Atta first, which I was blown away by. These are the two books I would definitely recommend. This is a sort of serious literary book. This is just a biting satire. And if you like those, like me, you'll probably go on to read some of his other stuff. I would read that for a laugh because it's very funny. I wouldn't bother with that unless you're interested in the New York club scene of the 80s and 90s. There are other books of his, mainly non-fiction, that I haven't picked out. There's one about, I think there's a couple about scandals and controversies within the early online gaming community, because I know nothing about that world. And I'm not sure what I'd get from them, although again, like this one on the Zodiac, where I do know a lot about it, they're written by Jared Kobeck, and he always has a clear path that is enough in its own, really, to win you over. So, that's why I was shocked to see that he's got a new book out released today, because there was, I say, no fanfare, no publicity, not even on Google. Not even can you find it on Google. It is on Amazon, obviously, because that's where I saw it and that's where I've bought it from. I probably need to look up who it's been published by, because, as I say, he couldn't get this published in America initially. I suspect something similar may have happened with the Zodiac book. Let me know. First of all, let me know if any of you guys have read any Jared Kobeck, and if so, what you think. And second of all, let me know if any of you who haven't read him but are potentially interested in reading him, because, as I say, he's not the best literary artist in the world by any means, but I think he's one of the most relevant, incisive, entertaining authors that we have out there, and nobody reads him. Okay, till next time, thanks very much.